Hi everyone, this is Tambo and welcome to my latest installment on how to build things in CLO. I was inspired to make this video primarily as a follow-up to my tutorial how to create a basic backpack that I made nearly 2 years ago. At the time when I made the video, I did not expect it to have as many views as it does or the positive reception it's received. A lot of people have found it very helpful, and till this day, users reach out to me from all over the world wanting to learn more, despite of its valid criticisms, primarily the lack of audio. So I'm sure you're pleased to hear that this video is narrated, as well as the right-click options not being visible while I was working. And I don't even remember which video recording software I was using at the time, but that's been fixed for this one. For this video, I thought it would be cool to show you guys more of a workflow tutorial on how to create a backpack. So rather than me explaining each functionality of the tools, it's more about my process and how I interpret, this bag utilizing closed tools. And I found this image online, and I think it's pretty good because it tells me all the information I need in order to build this duffel bag from scratch. So without further ado, let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is dedicate a pattern piece to place my reference image on. As I'll continuously reference the image, I just want it to live in my 2D window. Okay, and then I can move this out of the way, deactivate it, and hide it. So the first thing I want to do is establish the main structure of this duffel bag. I'm going to create a pattern piece, making this up as I go, 30 by 15, and I will probably need to create a new fabric for that. And to get a better idea of scale, I'm going to bring in an avatar just to compare it to. Okay, so how tall is this avatar? Okay, so she's 5'9". So assuming she's wearing this duffel bag with the shoulder strap, that makes sense to me scale-wise. So I'm going to go ahead and leave those measurements. Alright, so we have our front piece, and I'm going to copy and paste the back side as well. And during the initial construction, it's really important that you work in textured surface. The reason being is textured surface will show you the face or the front side of the fabric versus the back. So I could see here already that my back piece is already in the wrong direction. So I'll want to flip the normal to correct that positioning. I'm going to need a bottom piece as well. Okay, and I'm loosely arranging these patterns together. It's not critical that they're perfectly aligned because as soon as I sew them, they'll all come together. Okay, I'm going to need a top piece as well, so I'm going to recycle that same pattern. And then we'll need the side panels here. So that will be this segment's dimension by this segment. So that's going to be 15 by 15. Okay, and I could copy and paste that as well. I'm also arranging my patterns in 2D just as a best practice because it can get a bit confusing if none of this is organized, especially considering that all these pieces look pretty much the same. So at this point, I'm going to start sewing all the pieces together. I like to do this in 3D as I find it to be a little easier. Okay, I think I got all the pieces. At this stage, I'm going to be tempted to simulate to construct this. However, the default fabric is not rigid enough to retain its structure. So before I do that, what I like to do is go into simulation properties and change gravity to 0. This way, none of the pieces will fall. And I also like to freeze my bottom piece just to anchor it down. This way, when I simulate, it all comes together and nothing kind of falls to the ground. Also, adjust the placement here. So you get something like that. Okay. So now that we have the main structure completed, it's time to apply some of these seam lines. So looking at this, I think I'm going to start with these side seams here. What I'll need to do is essentially offset a line from the edge to make those markings. So on the front piece, I'll offset a line, let's see, 4 inches. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense to me. So we'll need to also put it on the top pattern and also on the back here. And then cut and sew all of those. Okay, cool. So now I'm looking at this and assuming that our piece that we drafted lands about here, I could see that the front is slightly offset down. And also these seams look like it's about halfway of the length of the pattern we've drafted. So maybe we can do these as well. Really easy way to put an internal line right down the center is distributing the internal line between segments. Okay, we have our internal line there. And it looks like we have another seam where the zipper is just a little above that line. So I could place that line in the center as well. And then slightly offset this above it. Let's say 2 inches. So something like that. And then we can offset this line from the line we just created here. Okay, so looking at it now, it appears that this may be too far down because I imagine that this edge here lands right about there. So what I want to do is maybe lift all of these up by maybe 1 inch. So I'm going to grab all of these and then shift those up about 1 inch. That makes a little more sense to me. Maybe even 1/2 inch more. Okay, so this one I guess is not quite in the halfway mark, but I think it's fine, so I'm gonna leave it at that. And now I could start cutting into these seams. Okay, I'm gonna wanna offset the same line here to these other pieces. So that was 9. Okay, and then we can also merge this piece here to this pattern piece. So I'm constantly clicking in my 3D window to make sense of my 2D space as well. So just so I know which segments I'm merging, I'll often click on them to view that blue dot, which tells me exactly where I click on the 3D model. Okay, great. We have the opening on the top here, so we can offset that. And I'm going to offset a line from these 3 segments here. So maybe about 2 inches. And also round off the corners as well. Okay, 3 looks pretty good. And now I'm noticing the zipper here. So where did I go? This top zipper looks about double the width of the front and these side zippers here. So how I'm going to interpret that is I'm going to say that this is a 1-inch zipper tape, whereas these here are 1/2 inch. So what I'm going to do is offset another line from here 1 inch. Okay, we have something like that. Now before we create the zippers on the side here, I'm going to want to merge these 3 pieces together, as this is one continuous piece. I'm going to merge this segment to this segment, as well as this segment up here to this segment. We also have to round this off as well. So maybe I'll do 3 inches again. If I simulate that, what ends up happening is this longer piece is now gathering into this side pattern here. So what I need to do is adjust the pattern dimensions to kind of accommodate that excess material that's being gathered. So looking at the sewing that I currently have, it's broken up into 3 separate sewing arrangements. So to easily view this, I'm going to consolidate the sewing and just apply one continuous sewing arrangement for each side. So how I'm going to do that is first I have to make a point here where the sewing starts. I could right click using the edit pattern tool. I can right click and add a point, in this case to the end. Adding point to start will place it next to where the notch is. So in this case, I want to place it here. So I'm going to add to pattern on end, and that will create a pattern point there. I'm going to do the same on this side. Okay, in this way, I could delete all of these and then use my free sewing tool and just make one sewing arrangement. So now when I click on this, I could see that it's about a little over 2-inch difference between each pattern piece. So what I want to do is widen this piece outward. This was 15 inches initially. I will add 2 inches to that. Let's see what that does. Okay, so that looks a little less gathered. And let's see our measurement here. Okay, so it's still off by almost 1/2 inch. So I will lengthen that some more. Okay, so at this point it's about 0.06 off. I'm gonna leave it like that. I'm not gonna, I mean, I could finesse with it. Maybe if we just do this a little more, 17.4. Is that any better? Yeah, so that's close enough for me. So I'm gonna leave it, but you get the idea. You would just need to alter the pattern pieces accordingly for it to, you know, for the measurements to match themselves. Since I've changed this measurement, I'm gonna wanna reflect that on my bottom piece because now it's gathering on the bottom here. So I changed this now to 17.4, and I will do the same on the bottom. All right, so that looks pretty good. And in real life also, these pattern pieces are typically gathered to sew on a curve, so I'm not too worried about that. So now that I've done all that work on this side, I'm gonna delete what's on the other side here and just copy and paste. The idea is you're not doing double work, so try to copy pattern pieces if you can, especially for symmetrical styles. Okay, and now I have to sew all of this together. So I'm going to make sense of it in my 2D window as well. So clicking around, oh, that piece is all the way over there. So I'm going to move this back over. So this piece is going to sew to this one. And then this piece, so that's even twisted. So I'm going to rotate this. This way, this segment is pointing in the same direction of where I need to sew it to. And then lastly, we have this piece. So I'm going to rotate that as well and put it up here. And we also have that. So that is in the right space. Okay, so let's start with this piece here. Okay, so that will sew to that. This can go to the bottom here. Okay, and then I want to sew this whole segment to multiple segments. So what I'm going to need to do is use my free sewing tool and then hold shift to everything I'm sewing to. Okay, and then that will go. Okay, so you can also hover over pattern pieces with your sewing tools to see where you are in the 2D space as well. You could see that cursor move on the corner there. It looks like I stopped my sewing, so I'll do that again. And that will continue onto this side. And when I let go, it will apply all the sewing relationships. And then lastly, I'm going to sew this segment here to here. And then that can go onto there. Okay. So now we can start marking out our zippers right in the middle here. So I'll distribute an internal line between segments. And because I decided I want these side zippers to be 1/2 inch width, what I'm going to do is offset an internal line 1/4 inch on each side. And I could delete that middle line now because I no longer need it. So you have something like that. Do the same on this side as well. And I can also offset a line for that front zipper. So that will be from this segment, and that will be 1/2 inch. Okay, so next we have the handles. So observing the handles here, I could see that they land about in thirds of this segment. So if we added pattern points here and here, it'd create 3 segments, 1, 2, and 3. So what I'm going to do is use the split tool on this pattern piece here. And then uniform split, number of segments, 3. So this will place those points relatively around the area that I'll sew to. And let me create the strap. So I'll do 2-inch width by 10 inches. Okay, and I'm gonna just use this point and sew outwards. I'll do that for both. Okay, those may be a little small, so I'm going to lengthen them just a tad. Okay, so it looks better, and then we can sew them to each other. Okay, great. So before I duplicate the strap onto the other side, what I want to do is first construct this center part here. So what's happening is that this part of the strap is being folded into itself in order to accommodate this pattern piece that wraps around and is fastened with Velcro. So how I like to approach that is actually break these 2 pieces up into 3 pieces. So I will offset an internal line on each sides of the center line here. So I'll do 3 inches and oops, wrong function, by 3. Okay, and then cut and sew both of these, and then merge the center. Okay, so now I have that middle piece there that I can easily fold. So I'm going to distribute an internal line and then fold this into itself, as well as sew it together. So when it comes to more intricate details like the strap, I'm noticing the pattern pieces are looking quite geometric. So at this point, it'd be in my best interest to lower the particle distance to 5. This way the mesh is denser and less prone to colliding with other pattern pieces or, going through any other patterns. This is looking a little wide, so I'm gonna shrink this maybe to 4.5. Yeah, something like that. Also, this piece is looking a bit round on the bottom, and how I could fix that is in the Edit Sewing tool, I'm going to change the sewing line type to turned. This will create a more pressed seam that will lay flatter. And I think I'm ready to duplicate it. Okay, I will also need to create those segment points back here. So this will sew to this point, and then this piece can sew here. Okay, and then I'm going to sew both of these together. Okay, I'll do it on the top there, and I can also sew them on the bottom as well. So I will sew this segment to this segment here. And when I'm sewing things, the direction you sew each segment is important because the notches have to align. However, when I'm working, I just tend to put down any sewing relationship, and it's going to be one direction or the other. So that time it was wrong, but that's just a simple fix of reversing the sewing. So I don't worry about that too much. Okay, so that comes together nicely, but I still think the straps are a little too short now, so I may have to lengthen them. What I'm going to do is lift this up and just lengthen it from the bottom so I don't mess up any of this detail here. Maybe another 2.5 inches. Shorten it an inch or so. Yeah, let's go with that. Okay, now that this handle is together, I'm going to create that pattern piece that's going to wrap around it here. So I'm going to find the width of this. So that ended up being 4.5 by, I don't know, 5. Okay, and then I need a center line here to fold so we can wrap this thing around the handle. So it's going to be this front portion that wraps around the top here, and then we can sew this onto itself. So what I'm going to need to do is offset an internal line from this edge so this edge can sew to. So I will do 1/2 inch, something like that, and then we can sew this to that internal line. Okay, that just bled through. I did forget to change the particle distance, so that may help out. Okay. And then this excess here, we will sew back onto itself. So we'll need to create an internal line on that segment as well. Is this rounded? So this is shaped here. So maybe I should have done that before. It's actually shaped quite a bit. Okay, I'm gonna lower this 1/2 inch then to give myself some more room. And then I could round off these corners. And then I will need another line here. So it's gonna sew just to the side. I'm not gonna sew the rounded parts here. So if you really wanna be organized with this sewing, what I need to do is split this up so I can have a point right down the center, as well as this part here. So we can have a point to go off of for each sewing. So if I go from that point outward, I'm gonna do the same on this side here. So I would go this direction. And that's just a quick way of distributing the sewing evenly. That point, oh, did I do it at 1/2 inch? So I'm gonna move this another 1/2. That should have been 1 total. So it does look like there is a little extra room in there. So to prevent me from messing up detail here, I'm actually gonna shorten this whole piece from the center. And I'm gonna cut and sew. I'm gonna make this a seam and then reduce that by 1/2 inch. Yep. And then I can merge this back together. Okay, great. Looks like there's a little black edge here, so we can offset that. I'm not gonna worry about offsetting this corner here because this is not even visible. So I'm just gonna leave that, but I can offset everything else. Yeah, 1/2 inch. Great. All right, at this point, maybe we can start adding the zippers. I am gonna pass on the shoulder strap. If you've made it this far, I'm confident that you can do it yourselves. It's really just the same combination of tools we've been using thus far. So I'm not gonna do the shoulder strap for the sake of time. So yeah, let's start putting in the zippers. So these are kind of our placeholder lines. So as soon as we cut and sew these lines here, we could delete these pattern pieces. We're going to be using the zipper tool to apply these zippers because they're one way. However, this top zipper we're going to express a little differently, and we're gonna apply zipper teeth as a texture and glue the zipper pulls and heads as trims, just to convey a two-way zipper. So for these ones, let's use our zipper tool. If you apply a zipper and it becomes inside out like this, that's an easy fix. You could just flip the normal and it should correct itself. Another thing is that these zippers have their own properties here. So they have their own particle distance. So I usually like to bring that down to 5 just so they're a little more stable during simulation, as well as increasing the width. So I've committed these to being ½ an inch total width, so I'll actually want to change this measurement to 1/4. This width applies to each half of the zipper tape. So when I do that, that will widen up there. And yeah, it's good practice to also zoom in while you're doing this. If you do it far away, sometimes you won't catch the corners, and your zipper will be crooked. And I will do the front as well. Could change these to match the other zipper. Okay, so when you use the zipper tool, the ends are actually not connected and you can sew them to the pattern. It just works a little differently because there is no pattern piece for the zipper tool that appears in the 2D window. So what we need to do is mark out a pattern point on each side of the zipper tape as well as one in the center, because what we're going to end up doing is sewing each segment to each side of the zipper tape. So if I click over here, I'm going to find the sewing that ends there. Okay, so what I want to do is mark out the point. We're going to do that to the end. And then we're going to also find the sewing here. And then we will mark at a point to the start. And then between these 2 points, I'm going to split it, uniform split, so it's evenly divided. And then I could switch to the segment sewing tool and sew each side together. Okay, so visually, this zipper looks fine. However, it poses a problem if we keep the pattern piece as this U shape, because when we apply a texture to convey our zipper teeth, it won't wrap around. So what we'll need to do is replace this U shape with a straight pattern piece. At this point, I'm going to probably lower the particle distance of my pattern pieces to establish the drape a little more, because what I'm going to end up doing is freezing these pieces around the zipper in order to keep that form of the tape, because if I just sew a straight piece in here, it's gonna push this top part out. So let me lower the particle distance of all this. To a more finished state, since we're pretty far along. This way we have some, more realistic drape and wrinkles coming through. Okay, so I'm going to delete this piece. And then I want to measure what this segment length is here. So that is 45.738. And then we've decided that this zipper will be 1 inch in width. Then I could sew the other side to this piece here. So this segment is gathered quite a bit. So you can see my cursor, it's over 3 inches. So if I were to simulate it, so I can superimpose side to kind of position that. So what I was saying earlier, if I simulate this now, it's going to push this pattern piece up and warp it. And it doesn't look that great. So what ends up happening when you build accessories specifically is you end up having to freeze certain pieces to kind of maintain the drape and structure that you want. So now when I freeze these and simulate, it will retain its form. And now we can add a texture image. So this nylon repeat I just took from the default zipper. So if you use the zipper tool and apply it and go to the texture section and open the browser window, it's this one I used, if you're wondering where I found it. So I'll need to dedicate a pattern piece to the zipper, or dedicate a fabric to the zipper pattern piece. Maybe a little thinner. Okay, and these are actually, should be the same. Weird, I don't know why the scale changed. Interesting. Okay, so I'm gonna change these to nylon. Okay, and then to convey that this is a two-way zipper, I'm gonna go into hardware and trims, down to the zipper folder, slider. I'm gonna find a style. This looks like a pretty pretty similar one, this first one here. Go to OBJ and then right click slider 1, add to workspace. I'm going to add it, I'm going to load it as a trim and then keep the scale on millimeters. Okay, so it popped up somewhere in the center of the workspace, but all I need to do is hit this glue icon and then paste it where I want it to be. And then use the gizmo to arrange it accordingly. It'll be something like that. And then I will need to get a pole as well. I think this one looks a little closer, slightly different, but it'll do. So that is puller 2, and again, I'm gonna load it as a trim, keep everything else, and then glue that as well. And position it so it makes sense visually. Then I could copy and paste this. Okay, so I'm gonna flip this. And if you want to scale these trims, you can hit this icon here, which will allow you to scale it if you need to change the sizing at all. Okay, let's go with that. Okay, we have these two little studs here. I can interpret that as a button. So let's mark those out. I could just create an internal line and that will offset, let's say, 1/2 inch from the edge there. Oh, so it should be in the center of this. So this was 2 inches. The width of the strap is 2 inches, so it would be 1 inch from this point. So I'm going to split that, mark that point out, and then drag that over there. Okay, that's better. And I could grab the button tool and just click right on the center there. Okay, so we do need to change this. So this just looks like a flat circular shape. So let's go into our button settings. Look at our options here. Let's see this first one. Yeah, so that's pretty much what we need. It is a bit wide, so let's shrink that down. Okay, and then what I can also do is select these and adjust the thread length. So even at 0, it still kind of hovers over the fabric, but if I change that to a negative value, negative 0.1, that will put it a lot closer to the surface. And while we're here, we can change this to metal. Okay, I'm just going to do it on the front here. Same process on the back. Okay, and at this point, I think we've finished the main construction of the bag, so we could get into the textures and coloring. So I'm still actually using the default fabric, so I could change this to the heavy canvas. And I'll probably need to adjust, because I'm changing the fabric's physical properties, I'll want to resimulate and adjust the drape. So what I want to do before I do that is freeze this zipper, again, so it retains its shape. So I'm going to simulate all this again and see if that impacts how it looks. It's going to be subtle because gravity is off. But for the sake of stabilizing simulation, I just like to do it when I change the physical properties. Yeah, it looks like this sort of changed. I don't know if that's because I finessed it or that's from the fabric's properties. Okay, so I'm gonna need, this is gonna be our red. So if you have this reference image, you could just eyedrop the color here. I do want it to be a little darker red, something like that. And then I'll need a copy of this as well for the black material. And okay, so let's select all the pattern pieces that are black. Okay, did I miss anything? So the zippers are black, so I'm going to select all of those, or the zipper tape at least. And when you change it to black, the texture becomes invisible. So what I like to do is max out the normal map, just so there's some indication that there is a zipper there. Or I'll change the black to a slightly lighter gray color. You could see how that looks. Oops. So yeah, just even that makes it come through a bit more visually. Okay, and then it does have a bit of a sheen to it, so I can maybe change the fabric or the material type to shiny. That may be a little too much, so let's change the roughness. It's actually looking too shiny still. Does the silk satin look any better? Okay, that looks a little better, but I'm gonna lower the reflection intensity just so it's subtle, so it picks up some of the light in the scene. Okay, what else do we have? I am noticing these edges are a bit straighter, whereas mine are round. So again, this is a sewing line type property. So if I change this to turned, I'll have a nicer, more crisp edge. So I could fix that here for these. Let's update that. I'll probably have to do this bottom part as well. That's connected to the bottom. And then at this point, I might as well unfreeze this. Okay, and yeah, let's add our textures as well. So I've only changed the fabric's physical properties on these, but I can click the 4 squares to go into my browsing window and find the canvas. It'd help if I spelt it right. Find the heavy cotton canvas material, and I can max this out as well. It'll look fine. It won't be overpowering the fabric, and I'll do the black fabric as well. Great, so we can add a little more realism. And I do have this grosgrain looking material here. So I will duplicate this fabric and use this texture. I'm going to change the color back to white so I could see the texture image. So it's this piece and then these handle pieces here. Okay, so this one looks right, however the straps need to be rotated. So to retain both, I actually need another copy of this. And I'll apply that to the straps and then change the direction of those. Okay, I'm going to max out the normals for this. Okay, so both are maxed. And then we need to darken both, so I can add just a little bit of a gray color there. Yeah. Okay, and then the zipper pulls can be changed to the metallic material type. And these don't seem too shiny, so I can lower or raise the roughness so it's not, so light doesn't hit it as hard, and also adjust these pulls. And these pulls are not the same as the one I used up top. So I'm going to select all of them and find that style I used on the ones over here. I think it was this. Yeah. Okay, so we have some top stitch detail that I could see. Looks like there's a double needle right there. So it would be somewhere around there. I could just use my segment top stitch tool And in hardware and trims, there is a top stitch folder, and I'm going to use this double needle since that's already pre-made for us. If you guys can't find this in your library, most likely you'll have to download it. This icon will appear blue with a blue N next to it, and that means there's new content to download. Okay, so I can adjust the offset of this. And then as well as the distance from each other. Make that black. Okay. Okay, it looks like we have some double top stitch on the sides of the zippers there. I'm going to need to duplicate this and change the color. Yeah, it looks like there's double needle up there as well. It's probably definitely a lot more that I'm missing. I see some here, but you get the point. I'll just finish this last one. Okay, so we've got our top stitch. So with the straps, we can probably thicken those. When you start, putting the ornamentations and textures of your project, you want to make sure you're in thick textured surface, because this will actually show the thickness of your fabric. So if I want to thicken these up, you need to go into additional thickness render, input the number. Okay, and that will reflect thickness. If you do that and you're in textured surface, it's going to appear paper thin. So again, the benefit of textured surface is just to see the front and back side of your fabric. But for presentation, always make sure you're in thick textured surface. Could probably thicken up this piece as well. It looks like a slightly thicker than this red fabric. Just so it lifts up a little more. Maybe this one as well. Okay, and then we have some piping, so we can apply the piping on the sides here to finish it off. All right, so a couple of properties I'll need to change on the piping here. So we can lower the particle distance. So it's already at 1.5, which is pretty good. I think the lowest you can reduce it to is 0.8, just to give it a little more stability while simulating. And then the width, we can probably increase this because ours looks a little too thin. Okay, and let's simulate. Just to let everything relax a little bit, and that's looking pretty good. Okay, so this completes this workflow tutorial. I hope you all found it really useful, and I hope it inspires you to tackle on your current projects you're doing. So thanks so much for watching, and until next time, thank you. Bye.